Our tips are back. We're talking about some more Final Fantasy, kind of as a whole here. What we have is a relatively interesting leak coming from 4chan. You know the drill with this type of shit. With any leak, really. Salt, grain, take it. You know, it may not be anything, right? Now, we've looked at plenty of leaks before on this channel, from 4chan to Reddit, Reset Era, etc., etc., and, you know, they've periodically come true. Not all of them, of course. So that's why we always kind of cover stuff like this on the channel. Occasionally, we don't go after every leak that's out there, but just in case it ends up being true, because there's obviously some big, important shit according to this list if it ends up being true. Now, before we actually hop into the list itself, one very interesting thing about this is that they're talking about an upcoming presentation for the Final Fantasy 35th anniversary, specifically in this case, February 7th. I can't find any like official announcements from Square Enix yet, and I don't know if that's out there or not. If you guys, I'm sure you guys can correct me in the comments on that if there has been some sort of official announcement. But assuming that there's not, and that this leak is announcing this for the first time, if it ends up coming true within the next couple weeks, like Square Enix themselves reveal, hey, we're doing a 35th anniversary presentation on February 7th, that adds a shit ton of credibility, obviously, to this leak, because they got a date right, at least. That's more or less all I got to say for the beginning of this video. We're just going to read over the list really quickly and talk about what I feel like needs to be talked about. While this leak does come from 4chan, I am going to pull a screenshot from Reddit just because it's a little more organized. 4chan's kind of ugly. There's a lot of ambitious shit in this list, so let's just hop right into it. The total runtime is apparently going to be an hour and 24 minutes, so an hour and a half essentially. The opening will be Final Fantasy History Presentation. For the Final Fantasy series specifically, we have the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster promotional video, Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line promotional video. Hironobu Sakaguchi presents Final Fantasy IX Remake this fall. This is kind of the big one right here. This is what everybody's really focusing on with this leak, is the 9 Remake, because we're all hoping that's a real thing. World of Final Fantasy II, A Mog of Light, May 19th, 2023. Stories from Ivalice, War of the Lions, Summer 2023. I'm assuming that's like a Final Fantasy Tactics thing, right? That's what I kind of know what War of the Lions is from. I don't know if they've used that. I think they've used that name before in something else, but whatever. Anyways, Final Fantasy X-3, now in development. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Memories, Winter, I guess that's like a trailer or something. Final Fantasy 16 Focal Presentation Announcement, March 24th, 2023. Final Fantasy Online specifically, we have Final Fantasy 11 and 14 Subscription Unity Project this fall. Don't know what that is exactly. Final Fantasy 11 Beginnings Rework Project this fall. So is that like a reboot or something? Kind of like a Realm Reborn type situation. Naoki Yoshida, Final Fantasy 14, A Realm Reborn Anniversary. Final Fantasy Mobile, we have Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis closed beta test, August 8th, 2023. We know that the closed beta is supposed to happen in summer at some point, so that kind of adds up. Final Fantasy Dissidia Opera Omnia Japan Xenos trailer. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius promotional video. And then additional stuff, we have Tetsuya Nomura presents Final Fantasy Memoria. Don't entirely know what that would be. Final Fantasy 14 Endwalker OST for Spotify and YouTube. Release date April 3rd, 2023. Final Fantasy Chiptunes album Summer 2023. Don't know what that is either. Final Fantasy Square Enix Store Sale. Yeah. Distant Worlds. Eorzean Symphony Volume 3. I think that's Eorze's like Final Fantasy 14, right? If I'm not mistaken. And then closing, Yasuke Matsuda Remarks. So obviously kind of the biggest takeaway from this for a lot of people out there is the 9 Remake. It's been rumored for a while now. More than a year for sure. I don't remember if it was ever rumored before the NVIDIA GeForce Now leak or whatever. But at least more than a year at this point, we've been anticipating this 9 Remake. And we're always hoping that it's a real thing. It's potentially the thing I'm wanting the most from this leak. I'm obviously anticipating another trailer for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That's up there, man, because we want to see more of that game. Because all we've had is that little teaser from summer 2022, right? So it's been a while since we've seen anything for Rebirth. I'm definitely looking forward to another trailer. But 9 is up there. 9's potentially like my third favorite Final Fantasy, second being Final Fantasy X, and obviously first being 7. So I definitely want a 9 Remake. More than I ever knew I did before we got the NVIDIA GeForce Now leak, right? Like, I never even knew I wanted a 9 Remake until it was a possibility. But moving on from the 9 Remake, because that's obviously the big one that people are anticipating, a 10-3 announcement of it being in development, that's where people are kind of like... I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can scoff at with this list, but like they've already said that they have a concept, like Nojima's got like a script or an idea for like a 10-3, right? But I think they've even said in interviews that like they're not ever going to do a 10-3 until after the remake project. So I don't know that they would ever announce one while they're still making the remake trilogy. We don't even have the second game yet. The second game's still like a year away at this point, right? And it's going to be a couple years after that, 3 to 4 years potentially after Rebirth comes out, for them to drop, the third remake game or whatever. So it's going to be a while till I think we'd ever see a 10-3. That said, though, it kind of depends on what they mean by the game's in development. Are they claiming that it's actively going to be like developed? They're going to be making the characters, the assets, the world, voice acting, all that other stuff? Or are they just announcing the game, it's in the pipeline, they're making a 10-3, it might not come out for several years, but they're just kind of revealing that 10-3 exists? Is that what they're claiming? Because if they're claiming that they're actually actively making the game, then yeah, it's probably not true, because we're still so far away from remake being done. Now, putting that stuff aside, I obviously do want a 10-3. Like, I love that world, I love those characters, I want to come back to Spira. I'm not the biggest fan of where the story's gone beyond Final Fantasy X-2. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of, like, Tidus, like, kicking, like, what he thought was a blitzball, and he just died again, he blew up or whatever because of a bomb. and then Una brought him back, but now you can't like learn the truth of what would happen because then we like permanently get rid of him or some shit. But then also it's like Sin's just back randomly, which I think kind of undermines what we did in 10-1, right? The first game, right? Because like 10-2 stands on its own, right? You still have Yuna and Riku, of course, and some other characters from the first 10 game, but there's nothing to do with Sin at all. Like, right? It's beyond that. It's the post-Sin era. So like them just bringing back Sin again for a potential third game is just like kind of lazy. Like Sin was a cool character. Sin's a good villain and thing that's like destroying the world and shit. I loved it. Yu Yevon was very underwhelming at the end, but I just don't want to fight Sin again. It's like, ugh, I'd rather just do something else. That's why I've always kind of been an advocate for the idea of a prequel game where we do like the Auron, Braska, and Jack journey. And we kind of know where that concludes, obviously, but I still want to see that pilgrimage, that full journey, because the dynamic between those three characters seem pretty interesting. I love to see the growth of Jack fully, because obviously as you watch like the Jack spheres and get like the backstory from like Auron and stuff, you see how like Jack matured over time, quit drinking, and came an actual good dude, and like sacrificed his fucking life to save Spirit. Like I want to see that full trajectory of when Jack's an asshole to a good guy by the end. Plus, I'd love to learn more about Braska. Like we learned some shit throughout Final Fantasy X. Obviously, we get flashbacks and the Jack spheres and all that other shit. But I feel like I don't know Braska enough, right? He's supposed to be this like god tier summoner. So I want to see what that's about. Like, I want to see Braska kicking some fucking ass. And of course, getting to know more of young Auron would be pretty damn cool as well. Now, moving on from the 9 remake and 10-3, I already kind of touched on it in the video, but a Rebirth trailer is obviously something I'm very much looking forward to. It's focused on the channel, Final Fantasy VII, of course. I'm assuming that's what Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Memories is meant to be. They kind of give like titles to their trailers and shit. I assume that's what that would be. And obviously them talking about 16, giving us like some sort of announcement for some sort of presentation for 16 in March. That obviously makes sense. We're getting up to that game coming out, obviously. We're already halfway through January. The game's dropping in June, so they're going to start marketing more and heavily 16 before long, I would think. It's been a little bit since I got that last trailer, I think, as well, like a month or two or something, so makes sense. Now, what is the likelihood of this list? I don't know, man, because a lot of this shit is apparently happening this year, which seems, I don't know how logical or realistic that is. Like, the list has World of Final Fantasy being at this event, but that's yet to be announced, and it'd be dropping apparently in May of this year, so it'd be revealed in February and dropping just a couple months later. That certainly happens with games sometimes, but I feel like they'd market it just a little bit more than that. And when it comes to the 9 remake, as much as I want this to be real, and with all the rumors and rumblings online, it feels like it is a real thing that's going to happen at some point, but this list has it coming out this fall. So that means that 2023 we'd have Final Fantasy 16 dropping this summer, 9 remake dropping this fall, and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth dropping this winter, which could be like also early 2024. And I just don't know how likely that one is, my dudes. It would come down to what exactly the 9 remake is. This is something we've talked about in the past before. Is it a 9 remake in the vein of Final Fantasy 7 remake, what they're doing there, where they're completely redoing the story more or less with like modern visuals and they're splitting up into multiple massive games and things like that? Or is it just like a graphical remake, right? Are they just remaking it in like Unreal Engine 4 or 5, but it's still the Final Fantasy 9 that you played back in 2000 or whatever? I don't know. That's what we don't know yet. We don't exactly know if the 9 remake exists, what exactly it is. Now, if it is just simply a visual remake as in the vein of like a Crisis Core Reunion, then yeah, of course that could drop this year after it's revealed, right? We've seen that with Crisis Core Reunion. It was revealed summer of last year, dropped winter of last year. So if it's just a graphics thing, then yeah, sure. That's perfectly capable of dropping this year, sometime after, obviously 16, and sometime before Rebirth. Like, that makes sense. What I will say, though, and it doesn't actually add any more credibility to this leak, is they just have a lot of dates, which I find to be interesting. Not every leak does that. Like, they'll be like, oh, there's an upcoming event, and these are all the games that are going to be there. But here they have, like, what's going to be at the event, but also specific dates for stuff, like the, Ever Crisis closed beta is, like, August 8th or whatever. Like, they have a specific date for that, which is interesting. Doesn't make it any more real, but it is interesting to take note of. If it's a fake list, they're at least putting some sort of effort into it, trying to make it look more realistic. It all remains to be seen, right? That's more or less a video. We have a couple weeks left until this date, February 7th, when this event's supposed to take place. Again, if Square Enix announces that there's a 35th anniversary event happening on February 7th of this year, that would obviously add a lot of credibility to this list itself. Now, that said, even if this event does exist, everything on the list might not be at that event. Even if they're all real, they might save the 9 remake for like E3 or something, right? So it just remains to be seen. Like, it's just a leak on 4chan. It could absolutely mean nothing. I probably talked about it more than I even should have, but whatever. I like to talk sometimes. We're rambling a bit now. It's probably in the video. You know the drill by now. What are your thoughts on this leak? Is it real? Is it not? The 9 remake, do you think it exists? If it does exist, what do you think it is? Is it similar to the 7 remake, or is it just like a visual upgrade, essentially? What do you think the 9 remake is? That's the video. Subscribe to if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, _DavidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.